Good evening. I'm Tim Welsh with Boardman High School TV, and along with me is my co-host, attorney Mark Huberman. And we are very pleased to bring you another edition of Boardman Biography, a BSTN program that features significant leaders and contributors to both the Boardman community and the Boardman Schools District.
In selecting today's guest, we have someone who, while not a Boardman graduate, is one who's as true blue a Boardmanite as anyone I know. He's made Boardman his home for over 50 years, worked here, educated his children here, and is truly one of our most beloved citizens. I'm speaking of none other than T.Gordon Welsh. Gordy, welcome to Boardman Biography.
Hi, Grandpa.
Hi, son.
Grandpa, let's take it back to the beginning. Tell us about where you were born, where you grew up.
I was born on the south side of Youngstown, Myrtle Avenue, as a matter of fact. Lived there for, I don't know how many years when we became wealthy, and we rented a house on Warren Avenue. And when I was 12 years old, we moved to Auburndale, which is where I finished living in Youngstown because I graduated from high school from Auburndale and went in Marine Corps right away.
What did your parents do for a living?
My dad was a steel worker and my mother a homemaker, which was kind of standard in this community in those days.
And did your dad serve in World War II?
No, World War I. I was not born to the youngest man in the world. I think my dad was almost 50 years old when I was born, and he had been in World War I.
And you have two brothers and a sister.
There are four of us. My sister and I are the only ones who are continued to live. My two brothers have passed away. The brother's in the middle. My sister's the oldest, and I'm the baby.
So I said at the outset that you were not a Boardman graduate.
I'm not.
Ursuline Irish, right?
I am indeed.
All right. And did you have a favorite teacher there?
Yes, I did. I had a nun. There were some great nuns that we had in high school, and the best, most effective teacher, I think, was a lady who somehow or other got the title of Mother Charles, which might seem inconsistent with an Ursuline sister, but it's a rank as far as the church is concerned. And she taught us world history, but she was her use of the King's English was so wonderful and so lovely that she sometimes would teach us lessons in world history that were very poetic.
Were all of the teachers nuns at that time?
Those days there were very few non-religious people. Our coaching staff, of course, were lay persons. I don't think of another lay person unless it were a coach.
Now, I was looking at your knuckles, and they don't seem too scarred or too bruised. Did they really do that? Do they really use rulers like they show in the movies and the plays?
I've had a ruler or two and an ear yanked, and an occasional smack across the shoulder usually is where that took place.
Were you involved in activities in high school?
Yeah, I was very active in I was president of the Dramatics Club. I was very
I wonder where that has all fallen to.
I don't know.
No idea.
And I was in the Glee Club, and I played football for 3 years. And,
With a helmet or without?
well, I should have played it without. I did, between my junior and senior years, broke my neck.
Is that right?
Yeah, like cleverly showing what a great diver I was and dived into shallow water. And you should not do it. Would tell everybody, avoid diving into shallow water. It hurts.
What did you play?
I was a defensive end, which is, the position of end is kind of passé now, although there are defensive ends. But I was a defensive end primarily. I played defense mostly.
Was Mooney around as a high school when you went to Ursuline?
No, good for them, they weren't. It happened, God's plan, to not subject them to our brutal forces.
So was Mooney was Ursuline then the only parochial high school?
Yes. Well, there was one in Warren, St. Mary's. Mm-hmm. Now, they were much smaller than we, so we did not play them in inter-school sports.
What prompted your parents to send you to Ursuline?
Well, I grew up in parochial school. I went to St. Pat's in Youngstown. I'm still a member of that parish. I was baptized there a long time. I think it was kind of a normal expectancy that when a youngster grew up in the parochial school system through 8th grades, that he wanted to go to Ursuline. I did, but my dad said to me once, "Where do you want to go to school?" And I said, "Ursuline." He said, "Well, that's great, son, but you got to earn it." But tuition, when I went to Ursuline High School, was $40 a semester, $80 a year. And I worked in the cafeteria picking up, we used to get little half-pint milk bottles, you know, that we used. And they
But
had
it's
to be
all
picked.
relative in terms of cost.
Yeah, indeed it was, because
Back then.
I worked hard to get that $80 together.
Sure.
And then we had a $7 activities fee thrown in on top of that.
Outrageous.
And our books were, I'll bet you, $6.
Amazing.
Times are different.
Highway robbery.
That's what my Baptist mother thought on occasion.
You know, if there's one thing, you know, people know about you in a lot of ways, something that, you know, was instilled into my memory since I was a toddler, is that you were a Marine.
Yeah.
You know, and what prompted you to join the Marine Corps?
Well, the prompt was that my dad was not in a position to send me to school, and I wanted to be available. I wanted to have the availability of the GI Bill. And my brother was a Marine, and I just thought, well, that was the thing to do. And I'm certainly not sorry that I did. You know,
Yeah.
it's left an impression on me, and I was a peacetime Marine. My dad used to say I was protecting my country against the red hordes of Jacksonville, North Carolina.
Where were you stationed?
Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, the whole time. I was on a weapons demonstration team for a period of time where I traveled. That was just wonderful duty. I was in Miami and Boston and all up and down the East Coast. Great duty.
And when you got out of the military, you said, you know, you were obviously interested in pursuing a college career. So where did you go from there?
Well, I went to, first thing I did in 2 weeks after I was out was marry your grandmother. And then that was in June of 56, and then I started school that September. Started school and worked in the sheet and tube 3 to 11, and would go to school in the mornings.
What did you major in?
Sociology. I smile at that because if you get a bachelor's degree in sociology, certainly you're going to pursue something else, you know.
So you kept pursuing?
I kept pursuing. I didn't pursue past school, no.
I see. So you said you got married shortly after the service. Where
Yes.
did you meet your wife, Joan?
I grew up with Joan. I met her in 6th grade at St. Patrick's School. She and her mom and dad had moved in there into that neighborhood, and into that geographical territory that St. Pat's covered. And then I never had a date with another girl.
Wow.
Yeah.
Love at first sight?
I don't think she could much stand me for until I wore her out. So,
Well, when did you move to Boardman?
we were married in 1956, and probably a year later, in June, or approximately June of 57, we bought a little house on Meadowbrook Avenue that we were in for a long, long time, perfectly comfortable there. And 10 years after my second son, Tim, was born, Joan became pregnant somehow or other, and we had to move. We didn't have enough room, so we moved to Indianola Road.
The big
Loved the
house.
house.
The big
Yeah,
house.
the big house, and we were there for 35 years, and I loved it.
Why Boardman?
Schools,
Is that right?
pretty much, yep.
So it had the reputation
We were
then?
comfortable, oh yes, and we were comfortable with it, and we were comfortable with certainly with the area and the neighborhood. When we bought the little house we were in, it was brand new. And so we felt we had pretty much arrived, that we were in Boardman, but the school system was the singular most attractive aspect of the whole thing to
So
us.
your boys all went to the Boardman schools?
Yeah, they all went, and my only grandchild also finished the Gordon School.
Pleased with the education they got?
Yes, indeed I am, and I'm pleased with the scope of it. You know, they all did academically well. Paul's a school teacher. Tim's dad's a lawyer and a magistrate, and my youngest son just this week is defending his not his PhD, but master's degree.
Thesis.
So the kids have done well, and that was the basis. The other things that attracted me so to it was glee club, choral groups, theater, that I still don't think in many schools those things are available. Certainly they're not available with the facility that we're blessed with to have here at Boardman. To go in that theater the other evening is just kind of an overwhelming thing, you know, and realizing that it's kids that have access to it and use it. First thing I saw here was the opening with, oh, God, I thought I'd never forget her name. You know.
Maureen McGovern?
Yeah, Maureen McGovern. And I've always thought she was as good as there is.
She was.
Now you mentioned after college you didn't pursue sociology, but you did, however, begin working in the sheriff's department.
Yeah, at this point in my life, I can acknowledge that the reason that I got a job in the sheriff's office while I was in college is because your grandma was the daughter of Sheriff Paul Langley. So I make no bones about the fact that I had a little pull in getting in there, and I stayed there until Grandpa lost the election 4 years later. And in those days, those jobs were not, as they are now, civil service. And when you served at the pleasure of the man who was the sheriff at the time, and of course the new fellow didn't go crazy over continuing my staying there, so I left there and I went into the Humane Society. The Humane Society then had multiple duties. It's a little different from what you would think. The Humane Society was actually was the Bureau of Support for Domestic Relations Court, where we collected alimony and support payments and paid them. We also did investigations. We did animal cruelty investigations, but they were almost minimal as compared to child neglect, child abuse, cruelty, those kinds of. We did aged parent neglect cases, and that's what I did for 12 years.
Did you, who was your boss?
His name was Korinsky, John Korinsky.
An attorney, right?
Yeah, he was an attorney, and he was my boss. In fact, through the board, I had to interview with the board of the Humane Society, but he was the guy that hired me.
You get through with the Humane Society, they became the Bureau of Support, so I suppose that ended that career.
Well, it did, and it didn't have to. At that time, or prior to that having occurred, I had become friends with Judge Bannon, Charles Bannon, through eating at a luncheon table in the old Pick Hotel. There was a group of lawyers, and because I spent my life with lawyers, I hung out with them for going to lunch. And Charlie and I became very close friends, and he asked me to work, if I would like to have a part-time job as a bailiff out in the Boardman County Court, because he had checked and determined there was no conflict with my doing that. So I was made a Boardman policeman just instantaneously.
So you became a deputy sheriff and a policeman.
Well, I was no longer a deputy sheriff.
But you were?
I had been, yes.
So you had a deputy sheriff and a policeman.
And then I became a
with no police training and no...
Oh, no. They didn't subject me to anything.
Except for your extensive training on the football field at Thurston High School. I mean,
One time, Grant Hess came out. Late Grant Hess was the police chief.
Yeah.
Came out to Boardman. I wore a Boardman uniform. And he said, let me take a look at your pistol, which I thought he was kidding. But I handed him my pistol. He said, hey, Welsh, this is empty. I said, oh, yeah, you could hurt somebody. I said, I have a lot of bullets here on my belt. Well, needless to say, that was the end of my unloaded gun day.
So Charlie moves from Boardman Court
downtown.
Yeah,
and Judge Leskivansky had asked me if I wanted to come to work in the Bureau of Support right from the Humane Society. This timing was kind of interesting because at that very time, Charlie Bannon had then been elected to the Common Pleas Court downtown and asked me if I wanted to go down with him. And I did. I was afraid of it. I was afraid of it because I thought of a bailiff as kind of a manservant, and I didn't want to be that. Well,
somebody to go get you coffee. And
never. Charlie
pick up your car.
Bannon never, ever asked anything like that, and I never felt that I didn't have an important job to do.
Tell me about Charlie Bannon. Your thoughts about Charlie Bannon.
Well, he's the finest jurist I've ever known. He's the most honorable man, along with my dad, that I've ever known. I just can't say enough of him. He's a compassionate, he has the best grasp, I think. Now, I'm a layman, I'm not an attorney. I still think Judge Bannon has the best grasp of the intention of the legislature when he considered law.
I always thought, what I always admired about Judge Bannon is that as much as any judge I knew, didn't matter what the newspaper said, didn't matter how controversial the case was, he agonized to do what was right.
He'd take case under advisement, or sometimes at the close of I don't want to get into it too deeply, but at the close of a criminal case, the prosecution of the case, there's always a motion by the defendant to dismiss there wasn't. And if Charlie would say, gentlemen, I'm going to take this under advisement. I thought, uh-oh. So anyway, I can remember going back in a very, very high publicity, controversial case of a guy was charged with murder, the arsenic poisoning of his wife. And motion was made that I mentioned. Went back and sat down with him, and he said, oh boy, teachers, which is what he called me, we're going to get in trouble over this. And I knew, of course, he was going to find for the defendant, and did. Got the devil in the newspaper, and he said to me, once I'll be damned if they're going to tell me how I should rule in my court when I know better.
And even after he retired, you continued to
Yeah.
pinch hit for him?
When I retired, after I had left, while he was still a judge, they created the job of court administrator. We had never had one. And I, through a long process of interviews with many different people, I was appointed to the job. And so I was the court administrator 20 years prior to my retirement. I ran the trial court system. Well, Charlie retired a year ahead of me, and a year later, subsequent to my retirement, he called me and asked me if I wanted a bailiff for a couple of cases. He had been assigned subsequent to his retirement by the Supreme Court to try cases, and I said, sure, I'd love to. So I did. I did a lot of it, as a matter of fact, and 2 whole summers I worked for Judge Christbaum.
Had to be easier working for Judge Bannon.
Oh, it wasn't. It certainly had to be on time. No,
And
he
Judge
was
Bannon,
not. He wasn't. He was. Judge Christbaum is very, very, very professional and very proficient in the operation of his court.
And Judge Bannon still looks great.
Yeah,
Still
he's
does
80
great.
years old.
Yeah.
He'd probably be angry at me for my mentioning it, but I was driving home the other day over West Boulevard, and saw a white-haired guy parked at the corner with his bicycle, and as I got closer, realized it was Chazzy, and waved at me. You know, he was waiting to get on West Boulevard. He rides his bike every day, and he doesn't ride his bike, a stationary bike, in the cellar where you've got to have a TV on or be bored to tears. He got out and went places on his bike.
That's great.
Yeah, he's a neat guy. I certainly was blessed.
You're a proud member of the St. Pat's Parish. We talked about that earlier.
Yeah, I
when we were
am.
talking about earlier on in your life. How long have you been a member of the church?
Since I was baptized at St.
Right.
Patrick's, and that makes 39
years?
35 years. So yeah, 73 years.
Well, you know, in that amount of time, what were some of the activities you participated in at church?
I've been in the choir since the 4th grade. I did have a break period in there, but in the 4th grade, this little nun whom I fell in love with, and you've heard me talk about her,
Absolutely.
Sister Cecilia, was the directress of the choir, and just the most wonderful lady, and talented and sweet, and I still take care of her grave. You know, Sister Cecilia's been dead for 5 years or so, but she was such a great lady that she made me love to go to choir practice. Except I didn't like that 4:30 stuff every night before you get out of school. But she's such a great lady. And again, a couple of people in my life besides my parents and my children and my grandson that I've been blessed because I've been associated with them. She certainly is high on my list.
You know, the name St. Patrick's Church in Youngstown
Fine church.
has some pretty ethnic connotations when it comes to the people attending there. You're a proud Irishman. I think that's pretty safe to say.
I am a proud Irishman.
And tell me about some of your Irish civic activities.
Well, I'm active in the AOH, the Ancient Order of Hibernians, and I'm director of Catholic Action with that group, and I'm also a trustee, I think. And one of my projects is that we take care of the Ursuline nuns' graves as best we can. We sing a song. It's a charitable organization, and we do raise money. And at Christmas time, we give some gift certificates to buy a whole Christmas for a family. We give them to different parish priests around here. We are a Catholic organization. In fact, that's a requirement of being an AOHer. And the primary job is to look after by constitution, is to look after the clergy. But clergy doesn't need looked after in 2010 as it did in the founding times. But we still try to pay attention. But we have charitable organizations that we do things for.
Gordy, I meant to mention at the outset, but I think everybody's kind of figured it out by now, is that my co-host is your grandson.
He is indeed.
And from everything I gather, he's one of the apples of your eye.
What are you going to do? He's your grandchild. You have to put up. No, he is indeed.
Thanks.
He's given his grandma and me more pleasure than he'll ever know. He's done some things, and he's done them very well. But the thing about which I'm most proud with Tim is he's the nicest kid I've ever known.
Didn't take the cameras off me for a minute here. So,
Yeah,
starting
top
a little
that,
teared
bud.
up. Yeah, really, thanks, Grandpa. You always set the standards so high. But of course, I'm not the only apple of your eye. You of course have three others.
Well, I've got three sons
Right, so-
that are not unimportant to me.
Right.
And your grandma and your mother. This thing spreads the more I think of it. I'm trying to protect myself as much as anything.
Well, Grandpa, that pretty much wraps it up, I think, for today when it comes to our edition